You're listening to Radio Blah Blah with Jeff and Jeff.
All right, here it is, yet another edition of Radio Blah Blah. My name is Jeff Scott. I'm sitting here in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. And joining me from the other side of the Bay of Fundy, down in Stewiacke, Nova Scotia, is the one and only...
The one and only Jeff Gray, Cool Uncle Jeff, as you said, in Stewiacke.
Cool Uncle
It's
Jeff?
going really well. I've been really busy. We've both been really busy.
Yeah, I know. I think it's been, when did we do our last show? I guess it was in the summer sometime.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, but that's just the way it's been. Like, I've traveled a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've been busy doing a lot of different things. So that's all good stuff, though. I'm happy doing lots of guitar recording these days with a cool singer right now. So... keeping busy.
I'm working on some original music, going to get a singer to come into my studio.
Are you really?
Lay some stuff down, and maybe I'll share it on Radio Blah Blah. We'll share our stuff.
That'd be really cool. I didn't know. I didn't know you were doing that.
Yeah. So the name of our topic tonight is guilty pleasures and
Screw ups.
All right. Well, I guess that'll become a little bit more clear as we go.
Well,
through,
we're not talking about the
as we unveil what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, we're not talking about the.
What's a guilty pleasure for you, Jeff?
Well, we're not. Well, first of all, the screw ups. We're not talking about the U.S. election. Right?
That's a whole different show altogether.
Well, the premise behind
that's the funny farm, the circus.
Exactly. Well, like you said, the premise behind this show, like, there's two sides of this thing. You and I talked, and there's things that we have that you don't. Everybody has these things like that they like that they don't want to admit to, and so that's kind of what the guilty pleasures part of this is. That no matter how hardcore we are in terms of being a rocker or in anything in our lives, there's little things that we just hide in our closets, right? So that was the premise behind it. So and the other.
I could go around wearing one of these heavy metal T-shirts that says AC/DC rules and death to disco or whatever, but deep down inside I can't listen to hard rock and heavy metal all the time.
Oh no,
it just drives me nuts. And there's stuff that I listened to when I was 17 or 18 would have just shocked me. I couldn't believe, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I'd ever listen to that. But we do. I mean, we have to have different styles. We have to have different things in our playlist, and just to keep our ears fed. It's like when you go to one of those all-you-can-eat smorgasbords. I mean, you can't just eat the chicken balls all night.
It's like,
so you got to have some rice and some veggies and whatever.
It's like a buffet. Who said that? Remember who said that? Being on tour is like being on a buffet. At a buffet.
It must have been Spinal
Tap. No, it was actually Paul Stanley when he was on the Oprah Winfrey show.
Oh yes, that's right. On Oprah.
He was talking about groupies. And he's describing groupies that's backstage as being like a buffet.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I guess it would be.
Well, I suppose. I've never had that privilege. But you talked about guilty pleasures. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that my list, actually, quite frankly, these are things that I would be, if my 18-year-old self would talk to me today, he'd say, what are you doing? How come are you admitting to that? Well, I'll go off with one of the first ones that I got here.
Okay. Oh, before we get into guilty pleasures, I thought we just mentioned that this kind of came about because we were kind of talking about the idea that, there's good music in all genres.
Right.
There's no really bad genre, and we'll kind of touch on that as well.
Yeah, that's
I'll just throw country music out there. I mean, country music gets a bad rap, and I'll get people who say to me like, you play anything but country, and we will just leave. And I've played in a band where my bandmates said, I will do anything but country. You insist on playing country, and we're walking. And I'm not a huge country fan at all, but there are some country artists I really like what they do. Yeah. I'll just throw Dwight Yoakam out there. I like everything Dwight Yoakam does. He's got a real handle on that style, and he brings a certain, I don't know what it is. He can do country music in a style that pays tribute. Can be a bit twangy without being hokey, if that makes any sense.
Well, he's almost like Dwight Yoakam is almost like he's like a country Elvis almost.
Yes, he is. Yeah,
and
he's almost a caricature of himself.
Yeah.
Even just the way he moves and holds the guitar and the boots and everything. It's like it doesn't get any hokier than that, but yet the music isn't hokey. It's likable. I don't know. I like Dwight.
I really resist genre descriptions anymore. You know, I saw something the other day. It really got me. There was this artist, this person on The Voice, and you probably saw me ranting about it on Facebook. But there's this person who described herself as indie pop. Indie pop.
Yeah.
I said, what the hell is indie pop? Indie pop is not a style.
No, indie means you're independent. You don't have a
It
label.
used to.
You're doing it for yourself. That's not a style.
It used to.
So, yeah.
But that's how I define it. It's like when you're like today, it's like I'm indie. I was like, what the hell? I'm indie. I
mean, you're Indian. You're from
I'm
India.
indie.
What do you mean?
I'm indie. I'm not Hindi. But you talked about Dwight Yoakam. He said something quite profound. I saw him on one of those shows, in the recording studio or at the artist studio or the guitar studio shows, and he was talking about music. And I remember him talking. You talked about Dwight Yoakam. And he said something one time. He said the guy was asking about it. He's got a brand new album out, and he was going out on tour. And the guy said, "What's it like, playing this new song on tour versus playing all your old songs?" And he said, is it different? He said, "Well, ask me in a year." He said, I haven't lived with this song long enough. We just wrote it, So I resist genre description, and I agree with what you said, Jeff. Definitely, good music is good music. I don't care what genre it is, and I wouldn't have said that when I was younger. I definitely would have drawn lines.
No, because
in
we
the sand.
pigeonholed ourselves into categories. Like I was a hard rocker.
You know what?
And I mean when stuff like Culture Club and Bananarama came on TV, I mean, we just had to laugh, right? You could just picture a bunch of us sitting around with our long hair. I had an AC/DC T-shirt. My best buddy had a Motley Crue T-shirt. My other buddy had a Black Sabbath T-shirt on, right? And we're watching these Friday night videos, and all of a sudden, Thompson Twins come on.
Yeah, I couldn't
and we had to
stand
call
them.
them fags, right? Because that's just what we had to do. And deep down, we might have liked the song, but we weren't going to admit it.
I didn't like it, but I still watched it because it was on videos, right?
Yeah.
I remember thinking, what are those freaks doing? But you know what it was, Jeff, was that music for you and I is different now. Like when we were growing up, music was part of our identity. And that's how we like when I was a Kiss fan when I was a teenager, it was part of my persona. When I was growing up, I dressed, I had long blonde hair and I dressed a certain way. And today I don't do that anymore. My persona is what it is, and music.
No, we grew up.
Yeah, and music is the backdrop or the soundtrack to your life, as opposed to a defining thing. So I'm with you 100% on that. But so for me, things like good music is good music, like you said. So I mean,
well, just to tie it in. Sorry to cut you off there, which I do all the time. Sorry.
Yeah, well, whatever.
You just said good music is good music. And you're talking about Kiss, tying it right back to that movie Detroit Rock City, which we've talked about on our other show, Watching You.
Yeah.
And in it, these guys are on their way to a Kiss concert, and they're just like you and I were back in 1978 in terms of style and hair and Kiss T-shirts and whatever. Yeah. And they run into these guys who are driving a Trans Am, and they're disco boys. They've got they look like John Travolta. They're dressed like John Travolta. They got the silver chains and the hairstyle and everything. And they're driving in their Trans Am, listening to disco. And the girl in the back seat is basically arguing with these guys, saying, good music is good music. It doesn't matter where it comes from. And these guys were so turned on to disco that when they ran into these Kiss freaks, they made fun of them and beat them up and took their pizza and whatever. Anyway, sorry, just reminded me of that part in the movie.
Well, it's apropos though, because if I was going to say, like, okay, so were you when disco came out? You were younger than me when disco was out, but were you one of these people, like me, who was really disco sucks?
Yeah, I had to jump on one side, so I figured I'd jump on the rock and roll side for sure. I mean, Johnny Fever was my hero, right? Yeah. And he wore T-shirts that said "Death to Disco." Yeah. And I wanted a T-shirt that said "Death to Disco." For some reason, I couldn't find one at Woolco. But anyway, yeah, I definitely jumped on the rock and roll bandwagon.
Well, that's one of my guilty pleasures, I got to say, is that at the time I definitely would have been a disco sucks. I really did not like disco. I was disgusted by it. I thought the world was coming to an end with this music. And it was, the reality is that it was trampling, and the popularity was trampling over everything that I really liked. And that's, I think, what I was really afraid of. But I could admit to today that I actually do like the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. And I don't think I liked it at the time so much, but in retrospect, as I listen to it now, I really do look at it now. It brings back all kinds of memories, of course, but I really do enjoy it. Like, I mean, there's a lot of songs on that soundtrack that I really do enjoy. I mean, the Bee Gees, they got trashed for that,
Yeah.
Their reputation for years
Well,
after that was
disco evolved out of funk.
right.
And funk had some amazing guitar lines and bass lines. And it's great when you hear an old disco tune on the radio. And it's not overly, I hate to use the word white, but you know what I mean? It has funk. It's got the roots. It's got the soul. And it's just got that, that real funky guitar, chicka, 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 chicka.
Yeah.
And that slappy bass sound, and like I'll just throw Michael Jackson out there. What he was doing was as close to disco as anything in the late 70s, but it was more rooted in funk. And I'll admit, there's stuff comes on the radio today, and it's pure 70s disco, but it's got enough funk in its soul to make it great.
Yeah, we talked about Wild Cherry, play that funky music. I remember we talked about that in an earlier show, and that's a good example of that crossover. Bee Gees were pure disco, I'd say, and there was a whole bunch of that music. Like I'll listen to it now when it comes on the radio now. I'll listen to it, and I can enjoy it today for the for the hooks and those kind of things. So it's a bit of a. Don't get me wrong, you won't find if you go look into my CD collection or on my playlist on my MP3 player. Even old saying I have an MP3 player, but you won't find any disco music that. Well, that's not quite true. I'll get to another guilty pleasure in a minute, but I consider that to be completely separate. But yeah, I would say the Bee Gees and all that disco era. There's those one-hit wonders that came out in the disco era. That just I think it's just nostalgia for me more than anything else. But but I also remember. Like Donna and I, my wife of 35 years, we were dating at the time when disco was.
Happy anniversary, by the way.
That was in August, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was recently because you just posted anniversary
No,
pictures.
I just came across those pictures.
Wedding pictures.
My wife
Sorry.
said, Donna said to me, what are you doing posting those for? Everybody's going to think it's our anniversary. No, I was looking for something else. I came across these photos, and I shared them from 1981 just to prove that I actually did have hair at one time, and I was quite a bit thinner. Right? See, but we were dating at the time, and I remember she was working at this place in Yarmouth called the Manor Inn, and they had a disco in the basement. When she was done work, I'd always meet her there. And then we go downstairs, and I hate dancing, but I was dating her, of course,
So you have to dance.
Yeah, but I got into it,
Guys have to do it. It's one of those things that guys got to do.
Oh yeah, tragedy.
Yeah.
I never forget that. Bee Gees coming with that follow-up, but that's one of mine. What about you? You got any? I got a bunch more, but let's talk about yours. What you got? You got a guilty pleasure?
Well, let me see. I made a little list here somewhere. I mean, I'm just going to use Culture Club as an example. Okay. I mean, I would never admit to liking Culture Club. And Boy George was just the biggest freak ever was.
God.
I mean, we laughed our asses off at that freak.
I didn't know what it was.
But I got to admit, I like Boy George's voice. When I hear that Christmas song Band-Aid with all the British performers, to me, Boy George, he just transcends all the others. It's such a rich, pure tone. The other day, Karma Chameleon came on the radio, and I thought, that's got such a cool little harmonica hook. And then I quickly remember that it's that silly video with them. They're British, and yet the whole thing is set on like an old Mississippi riverboat, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. But they also had a song called Church of the Poison Vine.
Yeah, that's a good song.
Which was incredibly, just really, really cool R&B groove. Yes. And I really appreciate. Now I appreciate what they were doing as much as I hated it at the time.
Well, it's like you said though. I remember when they first came out, I literally was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, what is
that? Now that's so different. Like it wouldn't be anything compared to today. Like today you wouldn't even flinch, but back in the day when that came out, Boy George came out, and everybody else in the band looked pretty normal, right? They just looked new wave-ish. But he had this feminine, dreadlock, goofy hat, canvas,
pasty
dressy,
makeup, totally androgynous. No one knew if he was male or female.
But he has a really good. At the end of the day, he has a really good, like you said, rhythm and blues, soulful voice, and the melodies that they had were really strong.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, I'd sit down now and listen to a Culture Club album.
I would.
Maybe not from beginning to end. I'd probably get bored with it. I don't know. But I think I could tolerate a whole album. I'd be interested to hear what other stuff they were doing, the stuff that didn't make the radio.
I have I have I wrote down '80s music as a general thing, right?
The whole '80s, just there you go.
I tell you why I wrote it down was because at the time I was, again, everything was sort of changing. Like I was stuck in the classic rock genre, if you will, right? Like I was still stuck in the Kiss and the Triumph, and then and Boy George and Wham and U2 and Tears for Fears. All these bands were coming out with different styles. Devo. Talking Heads, all this stuff that I was like, oh my God, I thought it was coming to an end. Like it was I couldn't stand it. And today, like I said, when I listen to radio stations, I find myself more than likely listening to an 80s station.
Yeah, I do too.
And I'm not sure, again, I'm not sure if it's nostalgia or if it's just that there really was some really good songwriting at the time.
There was. I just think that it was such a huge departure from that guitar-driven rock. If you think about bands like Triumph and April Wine and Kiss and Cheap Trick, where they really relied on that heavy guitar, if not heavy, at least a sort of a crunchy guitar sound. And now you had bands that were doing, it was so techno-sounding, just listen to Eurythmics. I think they're amazing, but at the time,
Agreed.
like something like Here Comes the Rain Again, just that opening keyboard part was so anti-April Wine, right? I mean, it was the exact opposite of what I was sitting down and learning on my guitar. I didn't hear any guitar on that stuff at all. And it just kind of irked me that it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
It didn't have the same warmth and sound of my 70s rock that I loved so much. And the bands in the 80s weren't really doing that sound anymore. They kind of branched off. It either became hair metal or heavy metal. So, I mean, you learn to sharpen your axe and listen to Iron Maiden. Or you tolerated Def Leppard and Bon Jovi, like bands like April Wine. Oh, they were kind of in the early 80s, but by mid to late 80s, you just weren't getting that sound anymore, were you?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, like you said, there was this whole thing. That was what it was. It was anti-guitar, if you will. It was even bands that I liked.
And so overproduced.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I don't know, it just seems so techno and overproduced.
Well, it was one of those things where you felt like, and the way you feel about music today somewhat, is that you almost felt like anybody could do it. It was like, when you watched that video of, and I said it wrong last, I Ran So Far Away by the Flock of Seagulls, right? Mm-hmm. And but you watch that video of that guy, and never mind that his hair was going one way and his voice was going another. But when he was playing the keyboard, if you remember, he has this little tiny keyboard, and what's he doing? He's playing with one finger. Yeah. It's like there's like 4 chord changes or pattern in or something like that. I can't remember whatever it is, but it's very minimalist. And here's this guy. He's not even playing with 2 fingers. He's playing with 1 finger. I'm thinking, this guy, that's a musician. And I think that's what I got caught up in, And even the bands that I really liked at the time were kind of bowing to that pressure. Like Rush did that. Like Rush got more and more heavier into keyboards. And and that kind of a sound, and started to, when the Police came out, Rush started to implement some of that sort of ska reggae backbeat stuff and keyboards into their music, and it kind of threw me. I was like, and I know it even bothered Alex Lifeson at the time.
But every great band will go through that. Through that pattern, okay? So you come out, let's just say you come out in 75 and you're huge.
Right.
It's because you had your own original style and you paved your own road, right? And then you're huge 5 years later, you're still huge. 7 years later, all of a sudden you're kind of on the downward slope. So what do? In order to try to stay on top, you look around and see what everyone else is doing. And then you start assimilating to what the trends are.
Remember we talked.
And so many great bands have done that.
Remember we talked about this, in I can't remember which episode we talked about. We talked about. I made a point about how the great bands had something that they were known for prior to a genre, whereas bands that were defined by the genre were the ones that fell by the wayside. So like the Rolling Stones adapted, for instance, and Rush and all these other bands. You can pick one. But they had already established themselves in what they did, and they tried to adapt to these things, but they had this other thing behind them that was keeping them going. And So it was different than it was if, I came out in New Wave and I did New Wave because everybody else was doing New Wave. And then when New Wave was gone, I had nothing. You know, so, but, you know, I threw down 80s music in general as one of those guilty pleasures for me today. Do you get some other ones?
And it's a nostalgia thing. I mean, you can hate it then, but you listen to it now, you say, oh, I know what I was doing when, you know, when that song was big, or I can remember when that video was on and I was making out with this girlfriend. You know, it's a totally, I can listen to I can listen to the 80s channel all weekend long. And as long as I don't repeat too many songs, I'm entertained because it's total nostalgia.
I'm totally visual with music. Like if a song comes on the radio, especially an older song like that, like I'll give you an example. Like if the Motels come on, for instance, I automatically transport myself to driving with Donna down to Yarmouth on the South Shore through Liverpool or someplace like that. In our we had a VW Rabbit, and listening to, and we had a Blaupunk stereo. And I remember listening to that Motels album and other ones as well. But that's exactly what I see. I even see the sky.
Yeah.
It's overcast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I listened to Akimbo Logo by Kim Mitchell, his first solo album. I see the same car driving to Fundy National Park. In this, you know, speeding down the highway from Moncton to Fundy National Park. I transport.
There's some songs that will do that. They'll transcend you right back to a moment.
Yeah.
Like you can actually still see colors and smell the smells, right? It's just that was such a significant time in your life, and that song was, you know, was so big, and you kind of liked it, or even if you didn't like it, it was just big and you heard it all the time anywhere. But you hear a certain song, and it just transcends you right back to a moment, and it's so vivid. Yeah, I like the way music does that.
Well, I don't think it's the same for everybody, though, Jeff. I think like for you and I, because we're musicians, I think there are a lot of people it's that way. But there's some people that the music is sort of just it's like, sort of like elevator music for them, whereas for other people it's a soundtrack. Like for us, it's a soundtrack.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know? How about you? What's some other guilty pleasures you have? I got some more. So
I love to mention the next one.
Oh, no, come on.
Well, I just started jotting these down today. I mean, if I had, you know, a couple of weeks to think about it, I'd probably come up with some more. Anyway, I wrote down Barry Manilow.
That is a good one. I got that beat though. But let's talk about.
Now, here's the thing, right? I knew nothing about Barry Manilow, other than he seemed to be a joke, right? Like if you're watching Three's Company or something, and someone says, "Oh, you know, what's the definition of torture? Having to sit through a Barry Manilow album, you know, or here's your grand prize, a Barry Manilow record, ha 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 ha." It just seemed to be a joke, and I knew nothing about Barry Manilow. So one time I was watching, I don't know, whatever, PBS or something, and Barry Manilow was on, and he's performing at a piano, just him, and it's like an intimate kind of a thing. He's talking to this small audience, and they're asking him questions, and he talks about the songs that he wrote, and I write the songs.
Yes.
Know? And he starts playing these songs, and I thought, he's an amazing songwriter. He's a really good singer. He's a good piano player, and I liked everything he did. And I enjoyed it. I watched the whole thing and enjoyed every minute of it. So
you may as well admit at the same time that you like Lawrence Welk.
I don't know if I like the Lawrence Welk.
1, the 2, and 3, 4. Yes, but
I also throw Tommy Hunter in there as well.
Well, you know what's funny is I liked early Barry Manilow when he first came out. I remember that because I was living in Massachusetts at the time, and I was just starting to date girls. Like I was 13, 14 years old, and I remember Mandy when it came out, and that was a really powerful song. And but then he kind of got more and more sing-songy, like more and more Lawrence Welky. So I never really followed. But I understand why people like him. You know that you realize the Simpsons did a parody of him, right?
Yeah, for sure. They
did.
He's easy to make fun of. Right? He's really easy to caricature because he kind of looks like a caricature of himself. You know. That's twice tonight I've said that.
So Homer Simpson sang.
Got to stay away from the cliches. Yeah. But, you know, if anything, watching the Barry Manilow show, I watched it for two reasons. One, I was curious to see what all the hype was about Barry Manilow and why everyone thought he was a joke. And two, I continued to watch it because I was enjoying it. That's the main thing. And what is said to me is there's so much music out there that I have yet to hear, and I'll probably like it. If you just take the time to say, I'm going to watch this, even if you watch it for 10 minutes or, you know, half an hour, whatever, and say, you know, here's an artist I've never listened to. I don't know anything about them. I'm going to take a half hour of my time and just explore what this artist can do.
Well, I'm not going to make fun of you for that because I got just as bad a thing. But there's
Well, you laughed pretty hard when I said Barry Manilow.
Well, there you go. You did it. This is
keep going.
on the Simpsons. There was Homer sings. He's at a hotel and his wife is there, and she at the hotel and she finds a turkey for him behind. He's really hungry, and she finds an actual turkey behind the bed. And he says, "Oh, Margie, you came and you found me a turkey while I was away from worky."
Yeah.
So mine is. So I'll give you another one.
Give me a guilty pleasure.
I'll give you one just as bad as Barry Manilow. Maybe. ABBA.
What?
ABBA. I like ABBA.
ABBA was on my list. As
Really?
well.
Yeah, I like.
Yeah.
I think their song
in the '70s, it seemed like they were the band to hate.
definitely.
I don't know. I like them.
Well, when they first came out, Waterloo came out, and it was kind of, it kind of had a. It wasn't as sort of, I don't know, papa-y, right? It kind of got more kind of theater like after a while. But I mean, obviously, the two girls were an attraction in the band. No matter, even if you didn't turn the sound on, we were going to watch them.
Yeah.
But I listen to them today, and I find I have them. If you looked at my MP3 player, it's really odd. You'd see Aerosmith, Kiss, Rush, Slayer, Lamb of God, ABBA.
Why not?
But you don't see. But they're one of.
I think they were
right?
great. I think Benny Anderson was an amazing writer and producer. The girls just were the perfect match.
Yes.
They just fit. And I don't always know. I don't think they were always singing harmony. I think sometimes they were singing.
They
in
were.
unison.
That's right.
And I don't know if they layered it in stereo or not, but oftentimes they were singing in
that's
unison,
right.
and it just worked. It's almost like when they recorded Janis Joplin, they always did two double
Right,
tracks,
right.
and it just made her voice sound
Right.
bigger. And I think with the two girls, they weren't always in harmony; they were just in unison, and it just gave it a more distinct sound.
Well, I think that's what they did, though. With the genius of their songwriting and their production, I mean, if you can get into those kind of things, is that they had these dramatic moments, and that's what they would do. Like you said, they would be in unison, singing the same notes, and then they'd break into a harmony at a strategic moment. And then the song, and even more so, if you listen to ABBA, and you just listen to the music that's going on in ABBA, I mean, it's extraordinarily complex.
Oh, it is. Oh, Benny Anderson he's great. He's really, really, he's the talent there. There's no doubt about it.
Well, if you listen to, and then the vocal arrangements are like, can be like Chiquitita or whatever that song is. There's all these different, and then they go from that to something really soulful, really, I can never tell which girl's singing for some reason.
No, I know sometimes because I've seen
Right.
videos and I know which one sings which parts, but I think they gave more to Agnetha sometimes when it was a solo part.
Right.
I think she got more solo moments than Frida did.
Yeah, Agnetha was the blonde girl, right?
I could be wrong. Blonde girl,
Yeah.
yeah. Most people probably don't know their names, right?
Yeah.
Just the blonde girl and the brunette.
But I've kind of recently discovered them. I think I bought Donna a CD a while back, and then I just put it on her MP3 player, and I borrowed her MP3 player, and then it started coming into the headset one day, and I was going to turn it off, and then I just kind of got hooked into it. So I've been, don't get me wrong, I don't sit there and listen to it all the time, but I really do appreciate it. So.
Well, I've had an ABBA CD in my car for years, and I'll often pop it in and just listen to it all the way through. It's just great. Very entertaining. It's very upbeat.
Yeah.
It's lively. It's pleasant.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be in a bad mood listening to
Yeah,
ABBA.
it's pretty hard.
Not, It's not war music or
you can hear some of the
Pink Floyd
yeah.
depression music. It's upbeat. It's lively.
You can hear some of the divorce stuff in there, like when they were splitting up. Like they
kind of like Fleetwood Mac. And
exactly. No, exactly. Yeah, there was this whole period there where they were, because there were two couples, right?
Yeah.
And they were all breaking
Just
up.
like Fleetwood Mac.
They
They all
were
went through the
breaking
same
up at
thing.
the same time, right? So we shared that one. Okay, well, it's good to know. Next time we get together, Jeff.
Well, very similar to ABBA. I'm just going to throw in another one here. Boney M.
I've only heard
Remember
one.
that?
I've only heard one album of theirs, and I hear it every freaking Christmas when Donna puts up the Christmas
Yeah, it's
tree.
the Christmas one.
Disco Christmas music is at the bottom of my trash bin, but I have to hear it. But
Well, they also had a couple of hits. They had one called "By the Rivers of Babylon."
oh yeah, I remember that.
I thought that they had a kind of it was sort of like a calypso sound,
Yeah, true.
At the time, it was I can remember late '70s when they were quite big, and anyone I was hanging around with. I mean, my God, Boney M were the band to poke fun of, mainly because the name didn't make a whole lot of sense, and the music was kind of. I guess we just didn't understand it. I mean, we're so used to hearing bands like Boston and Cheap Trick and Kiss, and now this band doing sort of a calypso kind of a sound with like a reggae undertone. But recently I was listening to some of their stuff, just playing some random YouTube videos by Boney M, and jeez, it's really cool stuff. I enjoyed it.
Well, it's funny because it's like I never at this point it's sort of osmosis for me, right? Like this, this Christmas album is kind of iconic for us now, right? A Boney M Christmas. If anybody doesn't have it, and it's just that's what the tree. I can't. Like, if we didn't have it when the tree was going up, I wouldn't know what to do. Having that plus eggnog with rum in it.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
you're all set.
They kind of have to go together, right? So I don't have too many more. I had you and I talked about the Spice Girls before. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. I can't avert I actually like some of their songs, and obviously the videos I really enjoy. But
of
but
course,
that's not even fair. But I gotta admit, like some of their songs, I kind of find were written well, and but I don't have a thing for them or anything like that. But I had them listed there. I had Shania Twain listed as someone who, and I suppose that's not so much of a guilty pleasure. I mean, people would say, "Well, that's not so off the wall." I guess to be a big fan of Shania Twain.
She was probably the biggest female country artist, or the biggest selling female artist for many years running. I mean, she was just huge. She transcended all the genres. I mean, she was pop, she was country, she was kind of rock, and I don't know. She sold more albums than any other female vocalist.
It's funny because what I really liked about her,
she had something there.
What I really liked about her though was early days. The second album, when she first started working with Mutt Lange, which was on the Woman in Me album, before she really exploded. That was the one that had Any Man of Mine on it, but it was much more country than the albums that came after that. But there's some songs on there. There's a background vocalist on that album, male vocalist.
I think it's Mutt Lange.
He's
singing he's doubling almost everything she does, almost an octave lower, and it just kind of gives it almost like a certain depth.
He's not singing. There's another guy singing on the album.
Is there?
Yeah.
I always thought it was Mutt.
I don't think so,
Anyway.
but there's this other. No, I would be shocked if it's Mutt Lange. It's I'm pretty sure it's not, but it doesn't really matter. Whoever the male singer is on that album, it just marries so well with Shania's voice. But it was much more country. Like it's like and very emotional, and the guitar playing. Like you sit and listen to it on the headphones. The guitar playing, like the little. I really learned a lot by listening to that album in terms of how Mutt Lange structures things on an album, because you can really hear, like you'll hear a guitar part once for 5 seconds, and you'll never hear it again in the song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just in a strategic location, at a strategic time. But
he was a good producer. I just wonder if sometimes some of it wasn't overproduced. Because probably about 10 years ago, I was in a band with a young singer here in St. John, and her country was her style. So we were doing a lot of Shania and a lot of Faith Hill and Gretchen Wilson.
Right.
And, we were certainly tearing apart the music on the album to try and learn the parts. And if anything, we learned that some of her later stuff was so overproduced.
Right.
I mean, just way too many layers of guitar, way too many layers of this, and then, fiddles on top, and it just became a bit
how do you
much.
duplicate it, right? You can't. So, but that's what I'm saying. If you listen to that second, it's the second album. She did an album on her own before.
Second one, that was her big album. Her first one didn't get a whole lot of
Well, there's
attention, but her second one with Mutt Lange was huge.
Yeah, the first one the first one with Mutt Lange did well. The Woman in Me, because I had Any Man of Mine on there, and it had
what I meant was her first album before she met Mutt Lange.
And then so Come
Didn't
On Over,
get a whole lot of attention.
That's right.
But the next one was with Mutt Lange.
Yes, and then the third one was with Mutt, and that was Come On Over, and that one was again. Like you said, I'm trying to support your point there, was that's when it started to get more and more produced, and less. If you listen to the music, it became bigger and bigger. The first album was a lot of definition in it. And anyway, she's interesting enough. Here's two rockers that really are talking about that, but I agree with you. I do think like what Mutt Lange did with Def Leppard, just layered it so much that it's
Yeah.
it's unrecognizable as music at some point, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any other ones? I had Kylie Minogue in them, but that's just a visual thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could mention all those.
I know.
Hot
I
numbers.
know all those little hot numbers. Jeez,
Who
buddy.
can't really make music, but they look great.
Well, Kylie Minogue can make music, I think.
What's
I
that?
think Kylie Minogue can make music, but
Yeah.
yeah. All right, you want to
I guess.
Wait, why don't we
There
transcend?
was something she did that was kind of cool, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Like she had this 80s thing, like the locomotion, but then
90s.
she came back with something in the 90s
Yeah.
that was
La, la,
actually quite
la,
likable.
La,
I can't remember
la,
what it was.
la. Yeah, she was quite. It was quite hot, actually, and the music was
Yeah.
good too. Yeah, she did, and then she had breast cancer, I think. Yeah, and I think she went through a difficult time, just like Olivia Newton-John, both Australian, right?
Yeah.
Oh wait, they're Scottish. I should have said they were Scottish.
Not Scottish.
Yeah,
What about some screw ups?
yeah.
Looking at our favorites, the ones
Yeah.
that we thought were
Why
absolute.
don't you go first?
And then it's like, fuck! I can't believe you did
Yeah, I
that.
know. Okay.
What were you thinking?
Right. What do you?
What do you got there,
Well, I
Jeff?
got about. What do you? I'd like to hear yours first. I'm going to see where you want to go with it because I got 5 or so. So
Okay, well, I was like I said, I just put a list
Yeah.
together today. I'm sure I'd come up with some more relevant ones, but I don't know. Like I was a Zappa fan
Oh.
back in the, I guess, early '80s. A friend of mine had some Zappa records. He said, "You got to listen to this," and I just thought it was so different, and so out there, and so cool. And I started collecting Zappa, and I thought, this guy is just a genius. I'm just so digging this. And then all of a sudden, someone said, "Hey, Zappa's got a hit on the radio," and I said, "No, he doesn't. He never would." Sure enough, it's Frank Zappa and his daughter, Moon Unit.
Oh,
Zappa.
right.
And the song was called Valley Girl. I don't know if
Yeah, I do.
remember that one, Jeff.
Gag me with a spoon. Like whatever. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
That was pretty bad.
Valley girl. Oh, that's it, eh? Yeah. Well, that's not that. I mean,
Oh, I've got more. I just wanted to.
well,
throw
I
that
would start
one.
with that.
I think the album was called "Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch," and I must admit, of all the Zappa albums I haven't heard, that's definitely one of them. So I don't know. Maybe the title and the album cover turned me off, and knowing that silly Valley Girl song was on it, I don't know. I've never ventured to explore that album.
Probably his most infamous performance, though, because I think more people will recognize that because of that whole Valley Girl thing and that whole, that got a lot of attention.
It did. Oh yeah.
Well, I'll go somewhere right away. Like I said, like one of our favorites is Kiss, right? So
Yeah.
I'll talk about Kiss for a second, and I'm going to talk about Kiss, and I'm going to tell you what what their big f up moment is, and you tell. But
Okay.
before I do, I want you to tell me what you think. I think it is.
Well, I wrote down Kiss as well, and I have what I think you are going to say about Kiss. Well, it's not even a musical thing. It was that movie they did in 1978.
Oh.
But I think you're going to say The Elder. No, probably not. I don't know. Go
That's a
ahead.
good guess. I think there was. It's actually Unmasked. The
Okay.
album Unmasked, but
Close.
I wrote down The Elder beside it because that kind of was a continuation of they started tripping down the stairs as far as I'm concerned, and then they finally hit the bottom when they did Elder. But I can appreciate it a little bit more. I can actually appreciate The Elder today. I still, to this day, have a real difficult time appreciating Unmasked, and it's just that it was just the production value was so poppy, and the songwriting was so obviously trying to come up with hits and trying to be poppy, trying to be something that they weren't, that was the beginning of the end for them as far as I was concerned in terms of, and that's when very quickly thereafter is when they ended up figuring, well, then we got to fix this by taking off the makeup.
Yeah.
But Unmasked was it. But in retrospect, when I go back and I listen to Dynasty, and for our Australian fans, Dynasty, when we listen to that, you can start to see it come into that album a bit in the way that it was produced. It starts to get closer to that poppy sound that you get on Unmasked, and it was the songwriting in that. So to me, that was a complete failure and disaster.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned Kiss too because we're both huge Kiss fans, but to me, it's just the entire '80s of Kiss.
I knew you were going to say.
I mean, I think by '79 they'd reached their heyday. early mid '80s, they took the makeup off, and for the rest of that decade, they were just trying to become another Bon Jovi or another Def Leppard, and I was so non-inspired by that whole genre. You know, I don't think I bought a single Kiss album in the entire '80s, and their fashion was just off the wall. It was just stupid. their leopard skins and their gloves and it was just weird. I mean, it was the '80s. The '80s were cruel to everyone. So
Well, it was pretty cruel to them, but I didn't mind it as much at the time. It's funny. It's the opposite for them. So like some '80s music I didn't like at the time, and now I can listen to and appreciate it. For them, I actually didn't mind it at the time, and now I can't appreciate it. It's the opposite. And I actually thought that's what you were going to say. You should have asked me, because I would have told you that's what you were going to say, just so you know. I did.
Okay.
I did. I said, you're going to...
you know, when you listen to these '80s retro stations where they'll play '80s hits all the time, they really don't pull up any Def Leppard or '80s Kiss or Whitesnake. They really stay away from that hair metal genre. They really stick to the Thompson Twins and Eurythmics and Genesis and that kind of. That's what I find, at least the stations I'm listening to.
Well, I agree, and but that whole hair metal thing that happened in the late '80s with Poison and, like you said, those bands. It was so late in the '80s. It wasn't recognizable with that new wave '80s material, and I think it was starting to break out. So that by the 1990s. You know, we had bands that were breaking loose of that hair metal thing altogether. But I think that hair metal was a transition, you know. And but I hear you with the '80s thing. That's what I figured you're going to say. I had in there, we're picking our favorites, right? So we're picking on our favorite bands. So my next one, I said Kiss. Let's go to yours next. What group was one of your favorites that you thought had a fall down moment?
Well, my next favorite band would have to be Pink Floyd, and I just absolutely love everything Pink Floyd, except, now this is kind of strange, usually a band is great and they do something bad about, 9 or 10 years into their career. I absolutely hate the first Pink Floyd album, which is called Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It's almost like, that moment in Spinal Tap where they're looking back to them in the 60s, it's like the Flower People, it's all kind of like hippie... psychedelic music. There's moments in it that sound like that, and then there's other moments that are just so friggin' off the wall bizarre. It's just, to me, it's stupid. They say Syd Barrett was a genius. No, I think Roger Waters was a genius, and I think that David Gilmour is a genius. I don't get it with Syd Barrett. I don't like a lot of that stuff. But now going forward another 10 or 12 years into their career, I think the worst thing they did was called The Final Cut.
Oh, yeah.
Which came just after Pink Floyd The Wall. And what it was, Pink Floyd The Wall had some energy, but it really had some it had some very depressing and dark moments that focused in on war and psychosis and schizophrenia. And it's like Roger Waters took the most, darkest, morose moments of The Wall and made an entire album out of it and called it The Final Cut. And to me, it was just a really bad album. Anyway.
Well, there you go. I mean, I can't really say that I listened to either one of those. No. But for me, I guess
save yourself the time.
I guess. Well, I just kind of missed the Pink Floyd thing. Like, it was a little bit too subdued for me at the time. But mine, mine is, of course, one of my other favorite bands is Rush. I had a hard time coming up with a moment that I would think was a fail moment, except that there was a point where the music started to get really boring, and it kind of transitioned through the '80s where they got into keyboards. They started doing background vocals for Geddy. Like, Geddy started doing harmonies on his vocals, and that sounds odd for me to say that, but if you listen to classic Rush, you go back to the early stuff. He never did background vocals. And his voice was much more of an instrument. He was much more, and whether you like it or you don't like it, it was very extreme. And it became more and more tempered and more. I'm not sure if he needed to do it like Paul Stanley, in terms of his voice becoming, more, maybe he heard it. But at the end of the day, it just became less dynamic, less exciting, and that whole '80s music stuff just got a little bit more boring for me. And it lasted right up until the last album that they did. I used to love. A new Rush album came out right up until say Moving Pictures, and even Signals back in 1983, '84. I think that's what it was. No, yeah, Grace Under Pressure came after that. But they, up to that point, I loved every song on an album. After that point, other than Hold Your Fire, it was like you pick one or two. So there's maybe they run their course for a long time until the most recent album, which is Clockwork Angels, which I really do like. But that was just it. It just kind of got really keyboardy, lots of harmony vocals, which took the edge off the music. It was less guitar based. I really enjoyed the bass and the drums and the riffs and the musicianship they used to display. Well, it was more obvious. You know what I mean? Like you know how you mentioned how Mutt Lange sort of made things too produced. Well, their music became more and more produced. And the best stuff they would do is you got one
Didn't
guitar.
sound like a three-piece.
No, that's right. If you had three, those guys, man, if you ever just watched them play their instruments, just the three of them, without all the effects, without keyboards, without Moog bass, without pedals, right? It was much more interesting. It's funny. I saw them a few times in concert, and you would see it. Like the crowd would be listening to the music, and Geddy would be behind the keyboards, and the crowd would have a certain energy level. And then there would be a point where he would jump out from behind the keyboards with the bass, and when Alex was doing a lead solo, and come out and jam the bass in the middle of the stage, and the crowd would go into a frenzy, right? And but you could tell there was a difference in those two outputs anyway. So that was it for that one. It was don't get me wrong, not that I didn't like it, it just it got kind of dusty and boring for me.
Yeah. I was never a huge Rush fan, but, like I heard enough on the radio and, hanging out in guys' basements, whatever, to appreciate what they did. And I admit the earlier Rush was just incredible guitar work.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I never really liked about Rush was Geddy Lee. I just never cared for him as a vocalist.
Yeah, see, that's the thing.
Mind you, he's good at what he does. And Tom Sawyer, I think, sounds great. It was funny, the other day I was looking for some Canadian anthems for whatever reason, but I found one of Geddy Lee doing the Canadian anthem at a ball game or something. It was awful. It was.
Oh, God.
I don't know. It's just terrible. He's not he's not a great singer.
I agree.
He's a rock and roller, but is he a great singer? I don't know.
Not in the traditional sense. He would, if you go back and listen, like to me, see, this is where I said to you, I said, whether you like it or you don't. When it was more extreme, like if you go back and listen to the album of Farewell to Kings, and you listen, that's the album that had Closer to the Heart on it. And the song, actually, A Farewell to Kings, to me is what Rush is all about. And if you go back, if you get a chance to go listen to that once, you'll hate his vocal because it is screechy, but it's got this vibrato in it, and it works in the music, and and it's guitar based, and it's actually got a classical guitar that opens the song up. But that to me was the epitome of what Rush should sound like. And then even when they got the Permanent Waves, it started to get a little bit flatter, and then Hemisphere's a little flatter. Or which one came first, and then by Moving Pictures it got a little flatter again. So anyway, but yeah, I get that. Like you either like Geddy or you don't, right? And I get it. Like,
and I would hear I'd hear their pop tunes on the radio, and I'm thinking, I don't know, this doesn't sound like Tom Sawyer. This doesn't sound like Limelight.
Yeah.
I just didn't really care for.
I didn't like it when they did that
some
stuff.
of the stuff that was making on the radio.
I never liked their pop sensibility.
And I'm only
stuff,
basing on what I heard on the radio. I never bought any Rush albums. It wasn't.
I think you're right, though. I think that was their weakest stuff. Like anything like Nobody's Hero, and they had these different songs on the radio that were trying to do a little bit of more stuff like that, and it just never really flew for me. There you go. That's Rush for me.
A band that I kind of followed for a few years in the 80s because I rediscovered that they had some really cool stuff with Styx.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoyed Equinox and Crystal Ball and the Pieces of Eight. Just my brother-in-law had some Styx albums. I thought, this is really cool stuff. I really like Dennis DeYoung. I thought he was incredibly.
I love Grand Illusion.
His Grand Illusion, his songs were. I don't like Tommy Shaw's songs, but there was some of Dennis DeYoung I really liked. And then they came up with this Paradise Theater. So being a big Styx fan, I had to go buy it because it was the new Styx album. Right. And I thought, well, it's kind of a concept, and it's kind of a stupid concept because it was they're just like talking about this old theater that's no longer in
Yeah,
operation, and it had sort of a kind of a vaudeville feel to some of the music, which I didn't really care for. And then a couple of years later, they came up with this Mr. Roboto. Kilroy
Oh my
was
God, that
here.
was awful.
I thought that was the most stupid
Kilroy
thing.
got
I thought here's a
Mr.
band that I kind
Roboto,
of respected
Domo.
for their songwriting and their musicianship and their vocals. And I thought the most stupid thing they ever did was that Mr. Roboto. It was just god awful horrible.
I gotta agree with that one. I mean, same time that Mandy was out by Barry Manilow, they had a song out called "Lady," which was probably their first song of prominence. Was a great rock song, great vocal by Dennis DeYoung, lots of and then Grand Illusion I thought was outstanding. Then, but you nailed it. Like that was got to be the stupidest moment.
Oh my god, it's just horrible.
Mr. Roboto, Domo. I was like, what are you doing?
Domo.
You know who's playing with? You know who plays with them? You know,
it's so bad.
Do you know who plays with them live now?
Larry Gowan.
Yeah. He fits in really well.
He is the most perfect fit for Styx. He truly is. I've been watching a lot of that on YouTube, and he's covering Dennis DeYoung really well. And they're letting him do his own stuff in the set. Like he'll do Criminal Mind and You're a Strange Animal. But when he does the Dennis DeYoung parts, he's a perfect.
I
fit
agree.
for that
He's
band.
as good as you can get, and he's a real good performer. Like I've got a DVD of Styx doing that Grand Illusion album and the next album. I think it's Pieces of Eight, maybe, and live. And he just fits, and they're great musicians. That band.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah, I thought Styx were great. And but yeah, like the '80s were not good to Styx at all.
No, I agree. They kind of went the Heart route. You know what I mean? Like what happened to Heart? Like I didn't like that what happened to Heart. They got into all those big, those big songs instead of that traditional rock and roll that they used to do, right?
Well, they were one of my favorite bands in the '70s, and they just had some killer kick-ass rock and roll.
Yeah.
They were good looking. They were fun to look at. And then they came back in the '80s, and it was all big hair and big power ballads and
Nancy's boobs.
horrible.
It was all Nancy. It was all about Nancy's boobs.
Say
It
that
was
again.
all about Nancy's boobs.
Oh, Nancy's boobs.
Because that's all of every video there was a boob shot. And,
I know. Yeah.
And Ann Wilson was fuzzed out, so you couldn't really see how big she'd gotten.
Yes.
Now here's a question
that
for
was
you.
the
You know how
thing.
you did the whole Betty and Veronica thing? I think we did this before, but if you go back to the '70s, if I gave you a choice, Ann or Nancy, who would you have picked?
In the '70s, Anne.
Oh, me too.
She had so much more sexiness about her. Nancy was almost kind of, I don't know, she just wasn't working it. She was playing the guitar. She was sexy playing the guitar, but she just wasn't working it. And then in the '80s, they really sexed up Nancy.
Well, they had to.
It was amazing. But Anne started putting on weight, and then they had to use, like different camera effects,
Yeah.
CinemaScope, whatever, right? And try to make her look a bit thinner on the screen.
It's not so much that, but it's just I didn't mind that. It was just the music was just generic, right?
And the music was terrible.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's the you know what, Jeff? I don't know if we've ever had another occasion. I'm checking my heartbeat right now because I don't think we've ever.
When we agree
I
on
know.
something.
I was shocked. I thought for sure you were going to say Nancy because I said Ann. Right? I knew that was going to happen. Well, I have one, and I know you're not a Metallica fan, but I'm a pretty big Metallica fan, and I missed the early days. Like I didn't really jump on board to the Black Album, so Metallica fans would tell you that I'm not a Metallica fan to start with because nothing good happened after at the after And Justice for All, which is a bunch of horse shit. But that's when I started with them. But they did this thing. They did an album in 2003, I think it was 2002. They were going through a real difficult time. James Hetfield was going through rehab. They were kicking their bass player out of the band, James Newsted, and did this album with Bob Rock because he had done the Black Album for them. So I think they tried to bring him back on to help revive their career a bit. And they did this album called Saint Anger. And oh my God, what a piece of garbage that thing is! It is so bad. The drums. If you go listen to it for just a little while. Actually, it came. You know what? When I first came down that New Year's to see you in St. John, when I first moved back to New Brunswick, when I came down on New Year's Day in the snow. It was a little bit. It was winter time there. That's why I was playing in the car. I didn't think it was too bad then, but it's horrible. But what they also did at the same time was they put out this movie called Some Kind of Monster. And it was basically a reality movie of them doing this album, and they had this psychologist with them, and this was your typical psychologist who goes around with, turtleneck sweaters, and he's got James and Lars talking to each other about their feelings, and you watch this movie, and it is painful to watch, and it just takes them. James was obviously going through addiction problems, right?
Did one look at the other at one point in time and say, "I envy us"?
No, I envy us. I envy us. I can finally do my acoustic with the London Philharmonic. Yes, there's a selection of my acoustic tunes with the London Philharmonic. Yes, we can go back and do that thing. So it was. They had definitely, but it was just so. It actually made them come across as, I don't know. It really like. It's like Superman took off the cape. You know how Gene Simmons says the Superman should never take off the cape. Well, they took it off big time, and all they were doing was fighting, and they was stupid, and they're sitting there trying to do these how these psychotherapy sessions go. Well, I'm feeling that you're feeling this and feeling that, and Lars is going, "What the fuck you talking about? It's a fucking song. We're playing a fucking song." Anyway, it just was the most bizarre thing. Anyway, so that was, and you wouldn't know much about that, but if you ever want to go see a weird movie, Jeff, go pull up that Some Kind of Monster. There you go.
Just to mention a couple more. Sure. Ted Nugent. I was always a huge Nugent fan. I think he's the bomb on guitar. I still appreciate and respect Nugent as a guitar player. He's got a loud mouth, but you know something? Donald Trump is making Nugent look more likable, isn't he?
He's trying, but he's really, it's funny. Just goes to show, though. I mean, his extreme politics are just. But I agree. Like he's really ruined his music. Really, with the way he shot his mouth off and the things that he said about, he said things like he wanted to assassinate the president and, he should be shooting them. And I know he's saying it the way he says things, but it's very irresponsible these days. And you just can't respect the guy anymore, right?
No, I mean, you listen to an album like Double Live Gonzo, I think 76 or 77. Just amazing guitar work. My God, Ted, it's like, if I had a choice to see any of 10 guitarists live tonight, I'd probably pick Ted Nugent. I mean, he's just incredible. But I saw him in Montreal around 2000. And I might have mentioned this before on this show or the other one. But anyway, at one point in time, someone brings him out another guitar. It's a Gibson, of course. And he says, I got to change guitars here. And he says, look at this guitar. This guitar is made in the best country on the planet, the USA. And I'm thinking, Ted, don't get up in front of a Canadian audience.
I remember that,
say something like that. Then he says, I'd play a Canadian guitar if they made any. Yeah. And he started, he's getting boos from the audience. I was like, oh, come on, Ted. You're not winning this audience by saying shit like that. Then, this is Montreal, mind you. He says, this is what he said, I swear to God. He says, the way I see it, if you don't speak English, stay the fuck out of my country.
Yes.
Ted Nugent.
Yeah.
Montreal, 2000. And I lost so much respect for Ted that I was having a yard sale later on that summer. I just gave away my Ted Nugent albums. I just didn't even want them anymore. Now I kind of wish I had them. But, geez, it's like you're this amazing guitar player, respected by so many guitar players. And, like, why do you have to be so political? That's what I don't get. But he is. It is what it is, and he is who he is.
Well, it's... I guess, we're going to disagree with him in so many ways. And that story that you told is actually, it's not even close to what he says these days.
Oh, I know.
And it's just not even worth, I mean, I don't even know what to say about the guy anymore. He just totally took something that was something that was primal, and talk about shooting your guns in hunting and talk about those kind of things. You can live with that, but the things he says about politics these days just isn't right. So
we're coming up on 1 hour. Jeff, any final thoughts on on this topic?
I think the only other one I wrote down was AC/DC. They just keep going on and on. The last albums are just, they're showing their age.
Kind of getting repetitive, isn't it? They're just repetitive.
Kinda.
Yeah, they're showing their age. I mean, there's
it's
hardly anyone left on stage
show-
from the original
Well,
band.
but the albums are even slow. If you listen to Stiff Upper Lip and the Black Ice and the new stuff, anything they put out nowadays just drags. It doesn't have that energy anymore. So it's time to hang it up, boys. Hang it up.
I think so.
Hang it
A lot
up.
of bands are like that. Well, I think we've got to hang it
Yeah,
up.
we do. We do.
I got some sleeping
Good
to do.
to
and
talk to you, though.
so
Let's hang it up.
we'll hang up.
We're gonna put it, let's
And
put
I
it-
apologize. I'm having a very difficult time. Hearing Jeff Gray tonight is kind of cutting in and out. So, but hopefully this will render itself a little better in the final mix.
No, you're-
So anyway, this is Jeff Scott over in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada.
And Jeff Gray in Stewiacke, Nova Scotia, and you're the one that's cutting out, so get off my back.
Okay. We'll talk to you next time, folks, on Radio Blah Blah.
Good night.